there was no fighting allowed in camp. And he's like, you run one more guy, we're going. And I remember David Backus, who was the captain, was leaning over, yelling at me, telling me to settle down or he's going to kill me, whatever it was. And he came up to me after the game, and I thought he was about to rip me one. And I was like, hey, Bax, man, sorry. He's just like really trying to make the team. And he's like, listen, if we're mad at you on the other team, you're doing something right. And they're going to notice that. And I remember like, that was like a big breath of fresh air that he said that. And when he said like, oh, they're going to notice that, I was like, okay, let's keep that up. And I think for the rest of that camp, it was, I was playing well, but I was running around. I was doing the things that they wanted me to do. And, that's what kept me there.
That was current Minnesota Wild Ryan Reaves, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolak. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolak. I am your host, Jason Podolak, and I am going to start off with a quick apology to anyone who is a regular listener of the podcast, because there has been no podcast episodes in the last probably 3 weeks, I think. Haven't released any. So sorry to you. It just kind of fell off the priority list for a little while. For those of you who have been following me for a long time, know that this is a one-man show essentially. And so with all the stuff that I do with the athletes in the mindset department and the teams that I work with, and then I do my on-ice skill development, and I'm running spring programs right now. There's just a lot on the go, and the podcast unfortunately took a little bit of a back seat. There's a lot going on behind the scenes at Up My Hockey with a new hire. I have somebody working with me full time. She's been fantastic, and it's been fun to work with her and bring her up to speed on all things Up My Hockey and to expand the brand and what it is we're going to be doing in the fall. So all that has to happen at some point in time. Plus, I am the father of 3 young hockey players too, so there's a lot of obligations and responsibilities that come with that. So apologies for the podcast taking a back seat, but it is actually pretty cool the way it worked out, because today's guest is Ryan Reaves, and the last episode that I published was Willard Reaves, which is Ryan's dad. So Ryan gets to follow in his dad's footsteps again, with Willard being a guest. And it was a pretty fun podcast because Ryan was able to either, verify some of Willard's stories or what have you. He said he needs to listen to Willard's episode because he wants to know for sure if he was telling all truth, so there's some lies mixed in there. He hasn't had a chance to listen to it yet. But Ryan was a great guest. It had me laughing at tons of times. He likes to tell a story, and it sounds like he was just authentic to who he is. From what I've heard, he's the same type of person in a locker room, same type of person around a dinner table, and he was that type of person on today's podcast. So the conversation is very easy. He's quick to smile, he's quick to poke fun at himself, and quick to make somebody laugh, and I appreciated his sense of humor today. We didn't get into the prankster side of Ryan. I have heard that he does some few things. He did mention it, I think, off the air after we were done, that when we were talking about social media, that he likes to do pranks, and maybe he should start a channel just around the pranks that he likes to pull. But we didn't discuss it on the show. But we did discuss a lot of things. Ryan Reaves, his home environment growing up, being raised by a Hall of Fame running back for the CFL and one of the league's most outstanding players, and what that was meant for him and his brother and his sister growing up, and life as a school athlete playing football and hockey, and also his road to becoming an NHL veteran now with over 800 games of NHL experience in his pocket. I think he's 36 years old right now and hoping to hit 1,000 games. So there was lots that we discussed today that I think that there's going to be some relevance for my hockey listeners out there. We talk about competitive spirit. We talk about how to deal with a coach. We talk about some of the changes Ryan had to make with his own training and his outlook in order to become an NHL regular, and now how he's staying relevant in a game that's becoming super fast and super skilled, and how he's still bringing value to the teams that he's playing with, and yeah, lots of good stuff. I did promise that we never talked about it on the air, but I did say that I would mention Ryan started a beer company called 7-5 Brewing. That is 7 with the number 5 written out, FIVE Brewing. That's being distributed in Vegas. He's thinking to expand it. So you're ever in Vegas, go find a 7-5 beer and give it a try. It's great that Ryan's getting involved in stuff, to look at what is going to happen after the game is over. I know a lot of athletes playing pro right now aren't thinking that way. So good job for Ryan to get something going there, and go support Ryan's company if you're ever out in Vegas. One of the things I like about Ryan, I bring it up on the program, is that he did spend some time in the minor leagues, like 4.5 years, in fact. And there was a time where Ryan didn't think that he was going to be an NHLer, which he's very candid about. And the fact that he ended up getting there, working his way up there, makes him that much more appreciative of where he is now. And it's probably allowing him to keep grinding and to keep being competitive, and to hang on and to keep proving people wrong, which he says he's kind of been doing his entire career. So I really love his upbringing. The fact that he did ride the buses in the AHL, that he did have to craft his game, and he did have to grow as a player, and nothing was ever given to him. He earned everything right from the time he was 7 years old in the Reaves house, and all the way up to becoming a pro hockey player. So. Without further ado, I will bring you current Minnesota Wild, also former member of the St. Louis Blues, Pittsburgh Penguins, Vegas Golden Knights, New York Rangers, Mr. Ryan Reaves. All right, here I am with Ryan Reaves, current forward with the Minnesota Wild. Welcome to Up My Hockey Podcast, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem.
Good to be here.
It's actually interesting because I was trying to do a podcast a week, and I got a ton of other stuff on the go outside of the podcast, and the podcast is kind of an adventure for me, just to connect with old teammates and that type of thing is how it started off. So I was trying to focus on the podcast, and then it gets to be a lot, like a one-man show, finding the guests, producing it, all that stuff. So your father was the last one that I actually did an interview for, and that's almost like a month ago now, because I just sort of needed to step back and take a break. So you were going to be released right after Willard, so I think that's kind of cool anyway. So anyways, thanks again for joining, and I look forward to getting to know you a little better.
For sure.
As far as maybe that's a great place to start, just with having a dad that was a hell of an accomplished athlete himself, like to win the best player award in the CFL as a running back, and everything that he had to go through to be the athlete he was. What type of environment was that for you to grow up in?
A very competitive one. It was, between me, my dad, and my brother. I think once my brother started getting a little bit older, where picking on him wasn't bugging him anymore, he would kind of fight back. It was basically just a 3-man war every day. It was, I remember we go on like vacation or just even around the house. My dad was always like swatting our feet, trying to make us trip, or not make us trip, but try and teach us to stay on our feet. Yeah. We'd be playing knee football in the basement, very, very narrow basement where he was on his knees. You had to get by him, and he'd never let you get by him. So, very, very competitive. And, he didn't let us win ever. It was always you got to earn every inch that you get, which I think I'm taking that with me, because I don't let my son win anything anymore.
I was going to say, sometimes, as we grow up in environments, I think as we have a little bit more perspective, we can see what maybe worked, maybe what didn't work, and what we want to apply, right? That's kind of the evolution of the species. That is something that you thought worked, and definitely something you want to keep incorporating.
Yeah, a lot of what my parents did to me, as cruel as it may, like my wife still thinks it was kind of cruel, but like, there was a lot of chirping in my family. Even when I was young, I had buck teeth. My mom used to call me Bucky. Like, that was my nickname. And I think just all that little stuff kind of grew some really tough skin on me. The constant battles, him never letting me win. We'd be playing basketball, and I'd go up to shoot the ball, and he would swat it down the driveway, and it would be going down the street. He's like, "Go get the ball." yeah, your ball, go get it. And it wasn't like you got to try hard. It's like, no, you're not in my house. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think for me, it made me tougher. It made me, it grew some tough skin on me. And then, my dad was my football coach, and I don't know how much you want to get into that, but when he was my coach, I still remember that was kind of the time where I became, you know, the tough guy that I was, just in a mindset. I can still remember the exact day. So we were playing, we were in a game, catch a kickoff return. I run down the left side, and there's three guys that are kind of angling me out on the sideline, and I ran out of bounds. And he came over, he grabbed me by my face, man. I said, "If you ever run out of bounds like that again, you'll never play another play. You run through him." I remember you go through him. And so next play, or the exact same thing. Caught a kickoff return. I run the exact same way. Same three guys. The one guy was kind of angling me off. I went right through this guy, put my head right through his chest. And this kid, he's laying on the field. He's got a broken collarbone. And my dad almost jumps over because, yeah, that's my boy. Oh, let's go. You know what I mean? And I just remember that was the day where I never ran around anybody anymore. It was always through people. And I know when he played football, because I had this little VHS cassette of him, and it was like a highlight tape of him, and I used to watch it like once a week. And he just, he was the same way. He could dance a little bit, but he liked running through people. And I think, you know, everything that we did in the house, me watching that tape and him coaching me, that made me the guy that I am.
That is
And my
wild.
mom
Yeah.
chirping me about my buck teeth.
Right. Right. That's such. I mean, that is. I think we kind of opened up a can of worms that is actually, close to me in the sense that I think, like the players I work with. I mean, you said that we talked a little off camera there. You have a 7 and a 4-year-old, and so my kids are 12, no, 13, 12, and 10 right now. So I'm a little bit ahead of you. Uh, but the players that I work with now in the skill development department and the kids that I coach, I mean, I'm seeing players, right? And so I understand generations change for sure. And this generation is much
So
less able to take any type of like verbal
it's
criticism.
crazy.
Yeah, it's like it. And so like there's the side of it that I totally understand, like that words matter and that we have to be respectful of words, and we want to respect people in the sense of that. But I think like the farther that pendulum has swung, like we're so much less able to take anything. You know what I mean? Do you think that there's a little bit of logic to what I'm saying there?
100%. I agree with you 100%. I think this generation right now is very soft. I think this whole participation ribbon just for showing up is an absolute joke. Like, there's no participation when you get older. If you don't do a good job when you get older, you get fired. If you're an athlete and you're not doing a good job, you're going to get cut. So teaching these kids that at a young age, you're setting them up for failure. And so I'll tell you what, there's no participation ribbons in this house. If my kid comes home with a participation ribbon, it's going in the garbage, and I'm gonna say, no, you're gonna work harder. That would have happened in my house, and I don't care who's watching right now. That's happening in my house, and you can tell me I'm a bad dad, or it's 2023. I don't care. That's just how it is.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. You already talked about competitiveness, and me and your old man talked about it for a while because that's what I named my spring team, like my Up My Hockey Compete. Like that's what we're called, the compete. Like I think it's one of the biggest virtues you can have, and I think it's a more of a competitive advantage than it ever has been because so few people want to do it. Which is maybe this is too quick of a jump, but I just want your opinion on that from the NHL perspective. I mean, you've played a million more games than I did in the show, but I did play a little bit back in the day and played 10 years pro in the 90s, right? So it was a tough era there. Like when I'm watching the game now at the best league in the world, like I'm kind of seeing the same thing. Like there's not as much compete, I don't think, like in the tough areas. I mean, playoffs is different. I will give some credit to playoffs. I love watching playoff hockey still. But do you feel that since you've kind of played through a couple different eras yourself?
I think, yeah, I think when the lockout happened, the one that I was part of, anyways. Um, you saw right after that happened that, a lot of players like me, like a lot of these guys who, would go out and play 4 minutes and just have, three fights and then they leave the game. Those guys started getting kicked out of the game, and they weren't getting contracts anymore because of that. The game started getting, naturally, I guess, a little softer. but the game was getting a lot quicker. I think if you look at sports right now, soccer, there's way more diving. Basketball, there's, flopping everywhere now. Football, they're cracking down on headshots. Hockey is the same way. The game is just turning more into skill and less, kind of barbaric, I guess. And I think that's just the way society is right now. That's what society's calling for, and that's where everything's going. So, do I like it? Not so much. I think, I think hockey is a fast, violent sport that needs to stay that way. And I don't think it's ever going to change. Totally. I don't think, everybody always asks me, is fighting going to get out of hockey? I don't think so, because, once you take fighting out of hockey, you're going to have, somebody like me run somebody over, a top guy who, and then what? And there's going to be no repercussions for it? Or you're going to have some little guy go take out, Connor McDavid's legs or take it out his knees, and he's going to look around. Nobody's going to be coming after him. So, you can't take the violence out of the sport, but for sure it has got a little softer. And, I think maybe a little whinier too. I think you see a lot of players whining a little bit more, but
Yeah.
That's just a generation.
Do you find that, you've stayed relevant. Credit to you. I really do applaud that. I think that your game is, yes, you can fight, of course, right? But there's less fighting. You have to do it less often, but just the style of play, I think, has become more relevant. And I think, like, from the drafted levels, when I'm talking to scouts, like, they would love to have a Ryan Reaves, right? Or a Tom Wilson, or some of these guys that can still play the game, but play the game a little bit, a little bit of a throwback, let's just say. Do you think that there's an advantage for some players that want to play that way now?
Yeah, I think, I think you have to be right now a player that if you're going to be like that, you still got to play. Like I said, and like you were just touching on a little bit, there's not going to be the guys that are just strictly fighting and running around and can't turn. You have to be able to catch somebody, and it's a fast game now, and you have to be able to put up some type of points. I'm not saying you got to get 30, 40, 50 points, but you got to put up a couple of goals and assists here once in a while. So yeah, I think it was funny when Pittsburgh won back to back, they had nobody. They had no toughness, and everybody started molding their teams after that, right? They were going faster up and down the lineup. And then all of a sudden it was Vegas versus Washington. You had me and Wilson in the finals. And then slowly it was like, oh, maybe we can get a little toughness in our lineup. Maybe that's the way to go. So, it's almost like almost like every other league. It's a copycat league where, one team does something and they're successful like that. Well, okay, we can do that too. Or, now the game's changing. Well, now we got to change with it too. So it fluctuates for sure. But I don't think it's ever going to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just to my point, I guess, that I was making is that little bit of heaviness and that grit is something that, it stands out more than ever, right? And it is still something that can intimidate. It's still something that gives your team a little extra edge, unless guys are willing to do it. So yes, you still have to be fast. Yes, you still need to be able to play, right? You need to have skill. But those guys that wanna go to those hard areas, I think are, it's harder to find those guys. So I do believe that it's a bit of a competitive advantage for some of these players coming up to be willing to go there. It's funny when I'm talking to GMs too, and you kind of spoke to it, is the difference in, like, the play styles, right? Like, to get into the playoffs, you almost need a little bit of a different team than the team you need when you arrive there, right? Because the rules change a little bit and it's a little bit grittier. So, you're with your team construction, you got to make sure you get to the dance. But sometimes that team that comes to the dance isn't the team that's going to win.
Yeah, well, look at what Edmonton was doing, besides the last couple of years, but before that, they were drafting, first overall, just bringing in skill after skill after skill, and they weren't making the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, then they brought Lucic in, and that was kind of like the transformation of that organization where, okay, we got to get a little grittier. And I don't know if they made the playoffs with him or not, but that was just kind of as they started getting grittier and grittier. And then now they're kind of a playoff team.
Yeah.
Make it to the second round this year. But yeah, it's a whole different ball game when you get into the playoffs. It's a grind, and especially when you have somebody else on the other side who's going to, willing to wear you out for 7 games, you got to be able to counter that.
Yeah, for sure. What let's go back actually just to where you started. I mean, you talked about the football, and I read in well, your dad actually brought it up that you ended up getting the knee injury that stopped you from playing football, and your dad thought that you probably would have been a football player instead of a hockey player if it hadn't been for that injury. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh man, I would like to say yeah. I probably enjoyed football a little bit more. I think I was probably a little bit better at football than I was at hockey when I was younger. But football is a tough route to get to. You got to go through the college, and there's you never know. Like one quick injury is could be a career ender in football. I have very loose knees. I wear two knee braces on the ice. So yeah, I don't know. I would like to say yeah. I really enjoyed football. I still do. I watch arguably much more football than I do any other sport. So yeah, let's say yeah.
Yeah, cool. Um, So he said he tried to get you involved with. I mean, he knew football obviously, so he was your football coach. But with hockey, he would step back and let other people kind of handle that. When it came to the father figure of him in the hockey environment, what were some of his like non-negotiables as far as you being on the ice?
You know what? My dad stayed completely out of the hockey thing. I think when I started as a defenseman and I got moved to forward because I kept jumping into the play and running people over. And I think right when that, his whole thing was, you don't go around people, you go through them if you have to, and you play gritty. I guess the one negotiable or non-negotiable was if I laid on the ice when I was hurt and I could get up. I remember I had oh man, like an arm injury or something. I laid on the ice and he absolutely lost it after the game. He's like, "You have a broken foot? You have a broken leg?" I was like, "No, my arm." He's like, "Well, then get your ass to the. Oh, can we swear? Sorry." He's get your ass to the bench. Don't ever lay on the ice. I don't ever want to see you lay on the ice again if you're not injured. And yeah, no, I try not to anymore. That's for sure.
Oh, what a
But my
great!
dad was he was more he was more the parent that was yelling in the crowd all the time, and you could hear him. Like he's a big, like big guy. He's 240 pounds, and he didn't like to be cold. He had this fur jacket, big puffy fur jacket down to the floor. You knew where he was, and he got kicked out of many arenas. That's for sure.
What would he be yelling? Who's he yelling at?
Normally, I would say 90% of the time it was me running somebody over. And like back in the day when you're kids and there's a bigger guy on the ice that keeps running people over. The parents are like, "Ah, get that guy out of here," blah blah blah. And sometimes the refs, don't know what to call because there's a kid hurt, but they think it's clean, but they want to call a penalty. And so a lot of the times it was either me running somebody over and the ref was giving me a penalty, my dad would be yelling at the ref, or me running somebody over not getting a penalty and the parents are yelling, and then my dad's yelling across at the parents, and then they start getting into it. And I don't know if I don't know. I guess the separation of the full sheet of ice made them a little braver because only one guy ever came really close to my dad, and the cops got called. They got kicked out of the arena.
Oh wow. Was that ever like from a player perspective? Was that something you were kind of proud of, or you'd laugh at the time, or did it embarrass you
I
at
thought it
all?
was
Or
I thought it was hilarious. Oh yeah, I
yeah.
remember I got kicked out of a game one time, and this guy just kept yelling, and I was already in the stands, and this guy kept yelling, and my dad. This is the time the cops got called. My dad stood up and started yelling back at them, and he just pointed towards the middle, like meet me over there, and you just saw them both walk over there, and all the parents got in the way, and then I think a cop showed up, and they both got kicked out of the arena. And I thought it was hilarious. He
Both
got kicked
kicked
out of
out
a
of you.
football game too. I don't know. I don't know if we can talk. What can we say on here?
Oh,
I
you can
don't
say whatever
know.
you want. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So my dad got kicked out of a football game one time. Exact same thing. He told me to run through this guy. I ran through him. The ref gave me a penalty, and he's like, "For what?" And he's like, "For roughing." He's like, "Well, what do you mean roughing?" He's like, and or unnecessary roughness. And he looked at me, and he was in the middle of the field at the time. He looked at me. He's like, "Do it again." And he called the exact same play. And ref threw a flag again. And my dad looks at the ref. He's like, "Hey, don't get mad at me because your wife didn't give you none last night." And he's like, "You're out of here."
Oh, that's awesome. What a great story. Um, so that was always just a part of you, right? I mean, it was obviously it was I don't know. I mean, maybe even demanded is the right word to say, but I mean, it was part of the ecosystem of the Reeve house, and it was a part of you innately. It sounded like, anyways, right? Like you like to play physical, and whether it was football or hockey, that was just something you wanted to do.
It was in the house. It was in sports. It was. I saw. I think I saw on your little clip. You were talking about the hallway story. Did he tell you that? That's real life. Like that's no joke. I haven't listened to it yet, but that hallway. If you met somebody in there, one of you wasn't making it to the way that you wanted to go. You're either getting pushed all the way back, or the other guy was getting pushed all the way back. And it was like I couldn't push my dad back until I started working out. So when I started coming home from, I think, Peoria, in the AHL my second year, when I really started focusing on my training off season, I think that was the first time I actually pushed my dad back. But between me and my brother, it was a little bit give and take. Then we
Yeah.
used to. Did you ever talk about the head story?
Oh yeah, he
Pushing
said like
heads.
two like battle rams kind of or whatever,
Oh
right?
yeah, oh yeah, and your head would just be red, because nobody wanted to give up, and then you start cheating a little bit, so you start grinding your hair in there, and you used to grab my head like this, and you just make the sound. You go woo and squeeze as hard as he could, and then go like rip all your scalp off. You weren't allowed to cry, whining. It was just you got to take it.
Oh, yeah, you know what? That story was funny. So I sometimes after I'm done the interview, or whatever, I'll share some of the stories with my wife, and so I was telling Sarah, I'm like, yeah, I love the battering ram story, because I mean, there's no way my kids could do it with me right now, right? But I'm like, you and Hudson should go at it. Oh, I would video that. That'd be good YouTube content right there.
Oh yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
gosh, so funny. Uh, so back in Bantam, so you're playing minor hockey. Obviously, you were a good enough player to get drafted 36th overall. My boy is actually just entering his Bantam draft season. My oldest one, right? So he's
Yes.
he's going to play Rink Academy next year, and he's on that the track, and he's wants to be a player and is super serious about it. But it's a big year for these guys, right? Especially in the WHL, where you were drafted to, because it's a year early. Like, it happens so fast. Do you remember like that Bantam draft year very much?
I wouldn't say I remember much of the hockey. I would say I remember the draft day. It happens at a weird time. Like, it happens during school, so you
Yeah, it
don't
just happened. Like,
really.
it just happened on Thursday this past week.
Right, and like during the day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember I was at school and I was in math class, and they were saying I was going, 1, 2, or 3 rounds. And I remember I was asking my math teachers, like, can you just pull up on your laptop to see if I'm gonna get drafted? Just leave it there. And I remember he told me, he's like, yeah, you just got drafted to Brandon. It's like, all right, here we go.
Sweet. And was that a place you wanted to be, being from Winnipeg at the time?
Um, I honestly didn't care. I mean, it was really nice that I was nice and close to the family. Obviously, they got to drive down. My parents came as many games as they could. They came to a ton of games actually. So that was really nice. My grandparents came a lot too. So yeah, I think I would rather be there than somewhere out west where I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to see the family.
Sure. Do you remember anything about like it's so well covered now. Like, I remember like our when I was drafted, well, actually I wasn't drafted, and we won't get into that story, but it was right when the draft was being instituted. So I had been listed prior, so I was out of the draft when it was my year. And that year the draft was pretty obscure, right? Like, there's there, you couldn't track it on social media and everything else, right? You were 10 years after me, or 11 years, I think. And then now these guys now, like, it's a thing, what I mean? Like, it's a real thing. And we're talking about,
NHL or Bantam?
I'm talking Bantam draft now. Like,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
talking the
yeah.
Bantam draft is even super covered, right? And you have the lists, and you can see who's
Oh
going
yeah.
where. Like, was there any stress at all for that with you, or any pressure did you find that year?
You know what? I think I've always been somebody who I've never stressed about getting to the next level. I think I always was somebody who was just like, you know what, work as hard as you can. That's all you can do, is just work as hard as you can. And if you get there, you get there. But first you got to put the work in. And even like, my first year in the AHL, I was hurt all season, and didn't have a great year. And I remember I came home and I was like, you know what, you want to make the NHL? Yeah, let's just work this summer. Let's really start focusing on the fitness and the skating and all that, and let's just work as hard as we can and see where it takes. Because I don't think I ever thought I was going to play in the NHL. I always just wanted to give myself a chance. You know what I mean? I was known as like a grinder. I think my best points in the WHL was 34, 35, something like that. So I didn't not that I didn't think I would make it, just that I wasn't expecting it. I was just expecting to work as hard as I can to put myself in a position that if that call came, I was ready. And so I don't think I ever really put it that much pressure on myself. I wasn't really like the year I got drafted into the NHL, didn't even know I got drafted. I was driving to the cottage, and I was just about to lose cell service, and my buddy called me. We're on the highway, and he's like, "Hey, so St. Louis." I was like, "What do you mean St. Louis?" He's like, "You just got drafted." And I was like, "Hey, stop the car!" And we pulled over in the middle of the highway. I was like, "I got drafted." He's like, "Yeah, St. Louis Blues." Like, no way. And then the GM called me, and one of the scouts that was scouting me. So yeah, and to be fair, I only talked to two teams, and both teams said, you might get drafted in the last round. We'll see. And I ended up getting drafted in the fifth, which was 2 rounds higher. So I guess maybe because they said that, I wasn't expecting to get drafted, but
Right.
I don't even know if I knew it was the draft day, to be honest with you.
Right. Isn't that crazy with expectations? And that was probably like one of the coolest calls you ever got because you didn't really
For
expect it,
sure.
right?
Yeah, I think the yeah, I think the coolest call was my signing call. When they called me to fly down and sign my first contract. I remember I signed, and I was sitting at a TGI Fridays right after, and I was like, I'm gonna go treat myself to a nice meal. I was sitting there by myself. I remember sitting on a patio, and I just leaned back. I was like, oh, I can't believe it. I was so happy sitting at a TGI Fridays. Things change.
Just a big wheel at TGI
Oh
Friday.
yeah, big dog in it. I was gonna buy the bar drinks.
Oh my goodness. That's actually a story I haven't told on here before. But the day I signed my deal, I was at home. It was off season, and I think I was 19, so old enough to drink here, right, in BC. And so we went to the bar, and it was like draft Tuesday or something, right? It was 25-cent drafts. So like I spent $600, I remember, on 25-cent draft beers that night. Like they were like lined up. I was like the biggest show in town. Like everyone was my
It's great.
buddy. Just signed my
It's crazy you
deal.
get like a little taste of money. I remember coming out of I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead a lot here, but I'll just tell you one more. Coming from the AHL, my first time I got called up, very beginning of the season, and kind of similar to you. I got called up for I think a week, and so back then I was making in the AHL like 3 grand a week or every 2 weeks. And I got called up, and I came home with a check. It was like 16 grand. And I thought I was Jeff Bezos. Like
Yeah.
I called all the boys like, hey, we're going to the bar right now. It was same thing. It was like $5 pitchers, and you got a pound of wings with it. So there was like 10 of us there. And I was like, you guys get whatever you want. And I spent like 300, $400. Like, boys, I got this. No problem.
Yeah. For sure, man. That's yeah, I mean those are the fun stories that I mean
Yeah.
that and the good memories. I remember my contract came in over fax. Like talk about date. Like it's crazy how quick things change, right?
That's
Like
crazy.
a
That's
fax
crazy.
of the contract to sign.
Did you
But
get a page saying that you got drafted? Did you check your
um
beeper?
I don't even know if those were around, honestly. And that would have been like 94. They probably weren't even around. Take a short break from the discussion with Ryan Reaves to remind you that Up My Hockey is not just a podcast. Up My Hockey is a development stream. It's a philosophy around how to get better, how to maximize your potential. Whether you are 13 or 23, hockey is much more than what you are doing for skills training, much more than what you are doing for strength and conditioning. Hockey is also about what is happening between your ears, the standards you set, the goals you set, the way you chase those goals, how you execute, and your motivation and passion around the sport are all things that I believe are skills you can control and skills you can develop. And if you are not thinking about resiliency, and if you are not thinking about mental toughness and raising your standards and how to play your best in the biggest moments when the lights are the brightest, then Up My Hockey is a place for you to explore your personal greatness. I believe greatness is a decision. I believe it comes as a choice. It doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen by default. The athletes that grow the quickest, that go the farthest, that become the boldest and the most courageous, and the biggest names that you recognize are also the ones that are most aligned with their thoughts, their words, and their actions in chasing their goals and dreams. So if you are curious about how to be your best, about what you are maybe not doing right now that could make you better, then check out upmyhockey.com. That's what I do. That's how I help players. That's how I help teams become better. How I give them the competitive advantage to make the next level, to make the team, to earn more minutes on the ice, to step into your own personal greatness. So if you believe greatness is a decision as well, and if you think that you can become better, if there's some area that you can improve, guess what? You're right. And sometimes we need a little bit of guidance and a little support with that. So Up My Hockey is the place for you, upmyhockey.com. If you want to check out the website, the parent group is a great place to start on Facebook, Up My Hockey Parent Group. I also have a YouTube channel where I'm posting the podcasts and some of my lessons from a pro to get a little bit of a flavor of what I like to talk about and how I like to coach and mentor that. So lots of places to follow me. I'm also on Instagram. So please follow where you would like to. The app is coming out soon, which I mentioned earlier. So the Up My Hockey app in the Google Store or in the Apple Store, find that, get that on your phone, and let's start growing your game and let's start reaching your highest potential and see where that takes you. Now let's get back to the conversation with Ryan Reaves. I mean, I love talking to guys that spend some time in the minors, and I think that's. I mean, hockey guys in general are good guys, but like the guys that have been on those buses, on those routes, I find that there's more humbleness. I find there's a more appreciation for what you have now, and just a general better human being in the locker room and otherwise. Did you feel that time in the AHL did help you appreciate where you're at?
Oh yeah. Especially after my first year, like we were just talking about, it was a really tough year for me. Came back, worked really hard. My second year, actually my coach said, you were probably one of the most improved players on the team. But just that, yeah, like you're saying, just that grind of the bus is like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like our bus wasn't even a bus. It was a semi trailer made into a sleeper. And this thing was terrifying to be on. And our bus driver, this truck driver, he had something wrong with him. He was like a pathological liar. He was like, man, I remember I was sitting up front with him, just like talking to him, and he was telling me he owned a helicopter. I was like, man, what are you driving a bus if you own a helicopter for? It's like, I just do this for fun. I was like, okay, whatever. And then he was telling me how if he hit the gears perfectly, he could take that truck and outrace a Porsche. And I was like, man, like I'm not even sitting up here anymore. I don't want to hear none of this. Like, come on. But yeah, it was crazy. Like sitting on that bus for 8, 12 hours, in the snow. I remember we were coming down the highway one time. We were sitting there playing cards, and a car swerved in front of us, and we had to swerve into oncoming traffic. And you just lift up the little window shade, and you have cars buzzing by you on both sides because we swerved into the other side of the highway. And he was like, "Oh man, we almost died." One time our heat the AC broke, and we had this terrible coach, Rick Wamsley. If you're watching this, I still hate you. This terrible coach. He had something about Olive Garden, and we had to go to Olive Garden and eat on the road. And so we're in Texas. We're going Peoria, Illinois to Texas, and so we're there. Get to Olive Garden, and he doesn't want to eat inside. He wants to eat on the bus. And it's like, well, our AC's broken. He's like, get on the bus. Because at the front where he's sitting, AC's working. So he's chilling. And we're sitting in the back, packed in like sardines, sweating like dogs. And so we're sitting there eating, and we weren't leaving for another 30 minutes. So we go stand outside. There's a DQ right across the street. A couple of us start walking over. He comes running off the bus, like, where are you going? It's like, I'm going to get some ice cream. It's hot in there. He's like, get on the bus. We don't eat ice cream. I was like, my guy, I'm 23 years old. Like, I can eat some ice cream. All right. He's like, no, no ice cream. I was like, oh, God, I hate you.
Yeah, the thing had an Olive Garden fetish. That's awesome.
Oh, this guy,
He was a
we hated
goalie,
it.
right?
This
Wasn't
guy hated
Walmsley a goalie?
He was, yeah. He was a goalie coach in St. Louis, and then he got sent to Peoria. And I don't know what it was. He absolutely hated me. We played a game against Houston. Was it Houston? One of the teams in I think it was that same trip actually. It was one of the teams in Texas, and we're playing. No, it was Houston. So we're playing against Matt Cassian. Remember that name?
Yep.
Big
No,
tough guy.
I'm thinking of the other Cassian, not Zach
Zach.
Cassian, but yeah.
Yeah, no. Matt Cassian was in the minor leagues for actually Minnesota team. Big tough guy. And I'm sitting there. I had one shift in the first period, and now it's like 4 minutes left in the first, and this guy is running around. He's laying guys out, and I'm sitting there. I was like, okay, he's gonna send me. And then our two top goal scorers, they both have to fight. One of them hurts his hand. The other one, whatever, he's in the penalty box. I turn around. I was like, are you gonna let me go do something about this? He's like, no, we're losing. Like, you just wait. I was like, we're down 1-0 in the first period. Our two best players just fought, and this guy's running around killing people. We're playing them on a back-to-back. He doesn't like send me out. I played, I think, 2 minutes that game or something crazy. So the next day, he scratches me. We're playing back-to-back against them. He scratches me. I skate with the team. I bag skate, and then he does a skating test with me. So the 3 laps, 6 times, so 18 laps, and it's the drop off, right? So it's 45 seconds. Your drop off can't be more than, I think, 3 seconds you want to keep it at. So you can't go over 48. And I do the first one, whatever, 45, 45, 46, 47, 48, 48.9, and I think I hit 49. Mind you, this is after a bag skate and a practice.
Yeah.
Calls me in the office. Revo, you're out of shape. It's like, Walmer, I'm not out of shape. You just bagged me after a bagger. Like, what do you mean I'm out of shape? He's like, you're out of shape, and like, that's why you're not playing. I was like, Walmer, this is bullshit. We get into it, and I walked out of his office. Drake Bearhowski was the assistant coach. He comes chasing. I was like, let's just leave it. All right, like whatever. We'll get you back on the ice. And the end of the year, I remember he calls me in the office, and he's like, Revo, you're out of shape, and if I'm back here, I was like, let me stop you there, Walmer. If you're back here next year, I'm asking for a trade. I'm not playing for you. You're the worst coach I've ever played for. And I said that to his face. I walked out of the meeting, and like a couple days later, so St. Louis didn't make the playoffs. I got a call from the GM. He's like, hey, come down to St. Louis. We want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, man, here we go. And I drive all the way to St. Louis, 3 hours for a 2-minute meeting. And all they said to me was, I know you didn't like Walmer, and he didn't really like you. He's not going to be back next year. We're going to completely forget about this year, and let's try and get you to the NHL next year. And I was like, oh man, I was sweating for this 3-hour drive, thinking you're going to read me out.
Yeah.
And I went back, and the next year I ended up, Jared Bednar came down, and I ended up making the NHL. Played a little bit, and then I got called up trade deadline that year.
That's awesome. So you played for Bedsy?
I did, yeah. He was great. I only had him for half a season, but he was unbelievable. One of my favorite coaches for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, he was an old teammate of mine in Spokane. He was actually a guest, 2-time guest on the podcast. So that's cool that you had a chance to play for him. He let's maybe talk about coaches a little bit, because like what an influence and what an impact they have, right? Like both positively and negatively, not only on like your development as a player, but also as like your ability to play at the next level or at the level you're at. Any advice or any stories as far as to the younger players out there, like how to navigate a poor relationship there?
Oh man, I think with a poor relationship, you can't let that noise deter you from what you want to do. You still have to put in the work, and whether you have this this noise in your ear that's just constantly putting you down or telling you you're doing this wrong, blah blah blah. At some point, coaches are coaches because they do know something, and I think you still have to be able to process the good information and block out the bad noise. But I think you still do have to listen. But at the end of the day, you can't let a bad coach stop you from where you want to get to. I still worked when Walmer was there. I worked my bag off, and whether he thought I was or not, I still did. And at least the GM in St. Louis recognized that. Um, but yeah, I think you have to work through it, because you're gonna run into that. I never thought before that. I never thought that a coach could really affect a team. I always thought, like, to a certain degree, like, yeah, you're gonna have your systems, but I didn't think that a coach could take a good team and make them very bad. We were not top in the league when he got there. We were like top in our division though. A month later, we were dead last, I think. Like, he destroyed that team. So, like, yeah, coaches do have a little bit of impact on a team for sure. They
Right.
really do. And and on the opposite, really good coaches can have a really good impact on a team.
Yeah.
I've had some really good advice from coaches. The best advice I ever got was from a guy I only had for a couple of years, Davis Payne. And not a lot of guys liked him. I don't know. I always liked him. He brought me up with him from St. Louis, and I remember he was the next in line to be the head coach in St. Louis. And when we were in Peoria, he told me, because believe it or not, I wasn't really a fighter back in the day. Junior, I only had, I think, 14 fights total in my 3 years. My first year in Peoria, I didn't fight a ton. And so after that year, he sat me down at year-end meeting. He's like, listen, you want to make the NHL, you're gonna have to start fighting. You run around, because I always ran around, I always hit guys, but I just wasn't really into the fighting, because my first fight ever, I popped my shoulder out, had to have shoulder surgery, so I just kind of wasn't scared of it. I just kind of shied away a little bit.
Yeah.
And he said, you want to make the NHL, you're gonna start fighting. You have to start sticking up for teammates. You're gonna have to start drawing some energy from the crowd. And man, like and I guess this is another advice for kids. When you have a coach that knows what he's talking about, or a coach that in my case was going to be the next NHL coach on my team that I was trying to make. Well, if he's telling you to do something, you should probably listen, right? And so I went that next summer, and I took boxing lessons, and I came back and I fought every single thing that moved. It didn't matter. At first I wasn't good. The first time I fought, squared off with somebody, caught right here, bleeding everywhere. Both of us. I broke his nose. He cut me open for 5-6 zips, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I fought, and I got noticed because of that. That's where they started noticing me, and they told me that we love how you're playing tough and fighting and all this, and now here I am.
Yeah.
And I maybe another coach would have told me that, maybe not, but I'm glad that coach told me at the time he did. Otherwise, I may not be sitting here. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Built out your identity a little bit, right? I mean, that's one of the things that I help players with right now too, is like understanding maybe where they can expand or what they need to focus on, right? Like what makes you unique to your team and to your organization that keeps you relevant, right? Like everyone, sometimes at the younger levels, right? Everyone wants to be whatever that is. Let's just say, the half wall guy in the power play, right? Obviously not everyone's going to be that as they move along, but there's going to be some way that you can impact. And the fact that he helped you see that and that you embrace that, that's pretty fantastic. The one thing, just to get back to like the bad coaches, I think, like as you said, you have to find some way to use it, right? Like you have to find some way to persevere, to keep your own intentions and your goals in line, and then to use it, because we've all been in the situation where we felt like the victim. And when you feel like the victim, like you feel sorry for yourself, right?
Oh,
That's not going
you
well.
sag, and you got no motivation.
Yeah,
For sure.
and then you're toast. And that's the thing, is like to keep in mind when I'm talking to the guys I'm working with. It's like, remember what you're in, like your goal is to play your best hockey and to get to whatever level that is. So like anytime like you're stepping away from that, whether you think it's deserved or not, right? Meaning an unfair environment, some guy who doesn't like you, like whatever, you're just screwing yourself over, right? So you got to keep that in mind of like, what is my intention and why am I here? And even though it's so hard sometimes because you feel like you're swimming uphill every single day, like those are the moments that probably make you stronger. I would bet you would agree with that, right?
At very least, to me, if there's a coach that doesn't like you and doesn't think that you're going to be anything, just use that as motivation to prove them wrong. That's always been my thing my whole career. Is so many people have told me that I'll never play in the NHL, or you're only going to play then I made it, and it's like, oh, you're never gonna stick. And then I stuck for a while. I was like, oh, you're a trash player. And then all of a sudden, I've been to a Stanley Cup final, and I'm been to a bunch of conference finals, and here I still am 13 years later with 800 and something games. Like, you know, I still remember when I was younger. I think I was playing Bantam. Okay, here's the only story I remember from Bantam then. Playing Bantam, and there was a scout there, and I didn't know. And I think I scored 2 goals that game. And somebody, I'm not going to say his name, but somebody in the hockey world told somebody that knows me that he talked to the scout, and this scout said this kid will never play in the NHL because his feet are too big. Now, that's fair. Back in the day, looking at my feet compared to my body, sure, but I was still a good player back in the day, despite my feet, and I was only going to grow into them. And I'm in the NHL right now with these big dogs still kicking. So I remember that pissed me off, but I was like, yeah, I'll show you.
Show you what these feet can do.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. What a weird thing to say, especially to a 14-year-old kid. That's like
Yeah.
obviously like
Crazy.
that's what grows first all the time, right? His
Yeah.
feet. It's like
Well, to be fair to whoever that scout was, my feet back in the day were outrageous. Like, I think when when I when I turned 8 years old, I had size 8 feet, and they grew with me every year until I turned 16. So at
wow.
16, I had size 16 feet, and
Wow.
then they shrunk a little bit because I started wearing my skates tighter. So I'm like a 14 and a half now. But like it just used to look like I was wearing flippers everywhere I walked. And like it took a while. Like when I was playing football at 8 years old, it was, if you look at the video, you're like, there's no way his feet are in there. Like those are cartoon feet. Like there's no way. But I
That's
grew into
great.
them.
That's great. So you mentioned earlier the one year in Peoria where you came back and you're talking about the hallway incident. You could finally push your dad back. Like it sounds like your standard kind of changed, right? You were a hard worker. You've taken pride in that your whole upbringing, right? Like that's what you brought to the ice. And actually, I just had the discussion the other day with my oldest son about the environment. And then all of a sudden, like you kind of see, like, say, maybe you go to your first NHL camp and it's like, holy smokes, like these guys work hard or these guys are this strong or whatever. Right. And then like you have to change your operating system to expand, right? You have to change the level at which you operate from. Was that a big, like, was there something about that summer where you said, like, where I really took it? Like, I'm sure you were working out before, but what changed that summer where you're like, now I'm going all in?
So my first rookie camp, summer rookie camp. Um, I was under the impression rookie camp was like a go meet and greet kind of thing. So I wasn't really skating that much yet. And I got to I got to camp, and the very first drill was picking up rims on my backhand and breaking it out. And I still remember I got one, blew up off my stick, got the second, blew up off my stick, and it was Andy Murray was the head coach at the time, and he blows the whistle down. This is like the first time I ever met this guy. Second time, I guess. He blows the whistle, stops practice, and just gives it to me. And the next day in the paper in St. Louis, it just says Reaves finds out how hard it is to play in the NHL. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should come a little more prepared from now on. And so that was a big aha moment for me.
Oh my goodness, that's funny. So you played for Andy Murray, or I guess not played for him, but you had a camp
I
with
didn't
him?
play for him. No,
Right.
he got fired the year before I got called up.
Gotcha.
But he was every one of my rookie camps, which was
Gotcha.
not fun.
Gotcha. I had him in LA when I was in LA, and anyways, just a little side story. I ended up getting traded there after like my best year ever as a pro, like scored almost 50 in the minors at like 22, got traded for Yannick Perreault, and then went over there and he wanted to me. They said, get ready. I want you to be, you're fighting for a third, fourth line right wing role right over there. So I did. I came to camp at like 215. It was the heaviest that I'd ever been in my life. I played at like 205 and kind of was going to change roles and ended up fighting Jim McKenzie. Like I wasn't a fighter. Like I would fight, but like that wasn't what I did. Right. I mean, I was the guy who was supposed to be putting the puck in. Then ended up fighting Jim McKenzie and get knocked over and had this camp. And anyways, but like he just wanted, it's one of those things. Like I don't know why or what, but like he wanted nothing to do with me at all. Never had a run in with him, never had anything, but it's just sort of one of those things. Getting back to a coach, it's like, I don't know, right? Sometimes they're for you and sometimes they're not. And I never saw the light of day there with LA.
Yeah, it's funny because like with me and Andy, I never actually had him, but every training camp, and he could have been blowing smoke, I don't know, but every meeting I ever had with him was, Ryan, I you're probably one of the players I check up on one of the most. Like I'm always saying, how's Ryan doing? Is he ready to come up here? And I don't know if he was just motivating me. It could have been, but I don't think it was ever like a bad relationship. I just never. I guess maybe I just never got there with him.
Right.
But I've heard that's probably a good thing for me. I heard the stories of him slipping notes under the door in the middle of the night and then quizzing. You never heard these stories?
No.
He would in the middle of the night when guys were sleeping, he would slip notes on the team the next morning. He'd slip them under their room in the hotel under the door, and I guess you're supposed to grab it and study it, and then he'd come to the rink and he'd quiz you. And like apparently, like nobody ever read these, and he wouldn't be very happy if you didn't get the right answers. So yeah, I don't think that's for me.
Right. So I don't think, just to go back to the workout though, like what changed with your workout strategy? I mean, you talked about not being prepared for camp, right? But then you got bigger, stronger. Like how did your off season look differently? So you're already a pro. I just want to remind everyone listening, if I got the timeline right, you've been a pro, right? You've been to a couple NHL camps, but this one particular summer, you decide to do something different. What was the motivation and what changed?
Oh, well, it was, I think the first time was that camp. To be honest, like I never really skated in the summer. I used to play summer league hockey and like bantam, but I wouldn't really skate that much in the summers. I was basically just coming to these camps cold. And then, that little motivation of the first rookie camp. Then I started doing a little bit skating, but my skating was basically a beer league. That was it. And
Yeah.
then my third year, I think it was my third year summer. I was still doing beer league hockey as my summer skates, and I was like, you know what, I should. And credit to my wife, I think she at the time I'd met her that summer, and she's like, maybe you should train like some of these other guys. Maybe you shouldn't just be playing beer league and having beers on the bench. Try and train for an NHL camp. I was like, yeah, you might be right. And so yeah, I started skating. Started skating with like a group down in here. There's a great group in Winnipeg that skates, and so I started going out with them a little bit. But more just so I always liked the gym, but I never like, I don't know what it was. I never really like, stuck to it. I would do a little bit, and I was like skin and bones when I was younger. And then one summer, I just came back, and I just, I think it was the summer he told me I was gonna have to start fighting. I came back and I got jacked, and ever since that summer, I'm a little bit of a gym rat now. Like in summers, I live at the gym. I'm there for 3 hours. Like I love it.
Yeah.
But it was just more like, you're looking at these other guys, how big they are, how fast they are, how ready they are for camp, and I'm sitting here thinking about what I've been doing. I've been slamming beers and shotgunning beers on the bench, and then going to play against guys who couldn't even make a Bantam team right now. Like I'm dancing through these guys, and I shouldn't be dancing through anybody if I'm training properly, right? So
Yeah.
it was just kind of that, like, these guys are prepared. I'm really not as prepared as them. It's time to buckle down. If you want to make the NHL, yeah, it's time to buckle down. So I started, I got a trainer. And I think to me, my dad taught me, both my parents taught me, and my grandpa, I guess, taught me to save my money. And so to me, going out and beer league was $75 registration. That was it. Paying a trainer is $75 a session, right? I was like, yeah, I don't think I need to pay that. So I think I just got off my wallet a little bit too. I think that was also a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of which, that is, I didn't even have an idea of going there, but like the investing in yourself, right? Like that investment in yourself. The one thing I do, I don't even know, like this is our first time talking, but like I'm working with the Salmon Arm Silverbacks as their mental performance coach. Yeah, I want to make sure that that's clearly not, I'm not a sports psychologist, but like working with, some of the intangibles of the game and how to piece it together so you can be your best on the ice, and helping some of these guys with preparation and whatever that may be. And I know that's becoming more relevant at the NHL level. Like where do you stand in that, or what do you even see in your environment there about guys investing in their own development and in their kind of high performance?
Guys, I think it's a little different now. I think as technology has changed in the last, I guess decade, especially like sports science and all that stuff. You see a lot of these younger kids, they're a lot more invested in their on ice and off ice training than I think even was available to, guys like me back in the day. For me, when I started investing in myself, when I finally got a trainer and, started doing some off ice stuff, started, working with somebody on ice, I still work with guys on ice. But for me, I think I've paid attention enough and I enjoy going to the gym enough that if I don't need a partner, I, I'd rather work out by myself.
Right.
I just feel like why do I need to pay somebody to just watch me do something when I think a lot of guys need somebody to watch them and tell them what to do because they need that motivation. A lot of guys don't like going to the gym.
Yeah.
I'd rather not pay somebody to just stand there and watch me do something and be like, "Hey, your session's over." I was like, "Well, no, like I got another hour to go here, so we're gonna keep going." Like
Yeah.
for me, I don't need that. But I do need that on ice stuff. I need to have a group with me. I need to work on skills with somebody. I need players that are, at the caliber of where I'm going to be playing, in the season. So, yeah, I think I started investing in myself a little bit more. But yeah, there's, this new generation. They have, you look at, Chris Stewart, a guy who played with here. He runs a hockey camp out here, and I was just watching some of the videos there, and man, it's crazy what these kids are doing now. They're doing an hour and a half, and I'm talking like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year olds. They're doing like an hour and a half of dry land. Then they're jumping on the ice for 2 sessions. And then they're, jumping back off the ice for another hour of dry land. And then they're eating, their green smoothies with, 400 different vegetables and vitamins. And it's like, I didn't have any of that when I was younger. And if
Right.
I did, I didn't know where to find it. I
Yeah.
promise you, I wasn't drinking no green smoothies.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely different. This generation is, I think, fortunate to have that kind of stuff. But I think I'm a little too old to just jump into it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
No,
like
I hear
green
you.
smoothies anyways.
Just going to take a short break from the podcast with Ryan Reaves to tell you that Up My Hockey is expanding. I'm super excited to share that there is going to be an Up My Hockey app that will be released here in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned in the Google Store or in the Apple Store for the upcoming UMH release. You can have it on your phone. There's going to be a ton of player. It's going to be player dedicated for the most part. Right now, there hasn't really been a place for players to follow me specifically, and the app is going to be the place to do that. It's also going to be where players can join my different membership funnels to get the lessons from the pro trainings from me. One-stop shop for all the podcast clips and podcasts. Coach's Corner is going to be there, Q&A opportunity for players, and also that's also where my group coaching is going to live, and also where my private clients live. So really excited about everything that's going on behind the scenes right now in the development of that app. So stay tuned for the Up My Hockey app. There will be a release on to my email list, as well as in my parent Facebook group, and we will be talking about it on the website as well. So if you want to be a part of that email list to make sure that you're one of the first to know about when the app is going to be available, by all means, check out the website and fill out the contact form and ask to be added to the mail list. And if you're not already a member of the Up My Hockey parent group on Facebook, by all means join. There's a lot of good things going on there, and a fantastic community as well, where you can find out about mindset, about personal development, how you can support your hockey player, and how your hockey player can support themselves in that community there. So yes, I am super pumped. The Up My Hockey app is about to be released. Stay tuned. Now back to the episode with Ryan Reaves. What was the point where you, like, I'm just looking at your elite prospects here. So you're Peoria for a few years. You look like you had a half year with St. Louis. Like, when was the, that first cup of coffee is obviously sweet, right? And you said you already celebrated, when you got that check and you came back. But when did you know, like, or at least when were you told to get a place, or when was that moment that you're like, holy shit, I'm like an NHLer, like for real now?
That would have been my first full year. So after that year, I played the half year. I got called up, trade deadline. They made a couple trades that made room for me, and then that next year, I made the team out of camp, and they told me to get a place, basically coming right out of camp, and that was a really good feeling, not having, because every single year I was in camp in St. Louis, there's a round of camp, and then there's cuts, and then you're sitting there at the Hilton Hotel right next to the rink, and you're sitting there and you're looking and you're waiting for a text, or you're waiting to see who got cut. And
Yeah.
okay, you made the first round, and then now you're sitting there after the next 3 ice sessions, and you got a call from the GM. He wants to see us. Like, yeah, okay, got cut. And then then that happens 3-4 years, and it's frustrating. So having coming out of that second, or the first full year, not getting cut the first round, second round, third round, and then all of a sudden the GM calls you and it's like, ah, shit. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, we want you, you made the team, we want you to get a place. That was okay, I made it, but I got to stay here.
Yeah.
I took somebody's spot. I took Cam Jansen's spot in St. Louis. There's always somebody that wants my spot, right? There's always somebody that's younger, better, whatever it is, probably trying to be hungrier than me. So I got to be hungry, and I got to keep this spot. Otherwise, somebody's taking it just as quick as I took it.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. Do you remember, like, how did that camp go? Did you do anything different? Did your game grow? Like, what do you remember anything in particular?
Uh, yeah, I think, you know what? Actually, I think that camp, um, we were playing an inter squad game, and I remember I was I was really trying to make the team, and I was running around in the inter squad game, and I think I ran a couple of their like vets, and Cam Jansen, and I want to say DJ King was still there in camp, unless that was a different year. But at least Cam Jansen came up to me. He's like, "Hey, you run one more guy, and we're going." And there was no fighting allowed in camp. And he's like, "You run one more guy, we're going." And I remember David Backus, who was the captain, was leaning over, yelling at me, telling me to settle down or he's going to kill me, whatever it was. And he came up to me after the game, and I thought he was about to rip me one. And I was like, "Hey, Bax, man, sorry." He's just like really trying to make the team. And he's like, "Listen, if we're mad at you on the other team, you're doing something right, and they're gonna notice that." And I remember like that was like a big breath of fresh air that he said that. And when he said like, "Oh, they're gonna notice that," I was like, "Okay, let's keep that up." And I think for the rest of that camp, it was, I was playing well, but I was running around. I was doing the things that they wanted me to do,
Right.
and that's what kept me there.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. That's true leadership there too by Bacchus, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
awesome. Anyone impact you along the way? I mean, that's a pretty good segue into that. Like, as far as coming up, now it seems like, and of course, I'm not in the locker rooms you're in, but you've taken on that leadership role and been kind of a glue guy. That's helping your teams have success. Who impacted you along the way as far as letting you know how to be a pro? How to feel comfortable in the league and made a positive impact.
So Bear Jackman was for sure number one. He was he was an older guy on the team, well respected on the team around the league, assistant captain, and he actually lived you know 3-4 blocks away from me. Like I could walk to his house. And so coming up, he was always a guy that would invite me over for, dinners, drinks, whatever it was. And, to me, I was like, I'm just this rookie, and I'm sitting here with assistant captain who, won rookie of the year one year, and, pretty big name in St. Louis. And he never acted, to me, never acted like he was that guy. He always acted like, we're just teammates, and now we're friends. And I didn't have to like try and be, some rookie is like, "Oh, here, let me clean your plate," or can I get you a beer? He was always, "Hey, Revo, you want a beer?" You know what I mean? He just
Yeah.
he made me feel very welcome on the team. Especially with the older guys, and just a guy who, if I was doing something stupid, he would. It wasn't like he would snap, but he'd be like, "Revo, calm down a little bit," or, something was happening in the game, and Rebo, maybe that's you right now. You know what I mean? He was definitely one of those guys. I would say he was number one. I would say Alex Steen was number two. A guy, same kind of thing. We weren't as close as me and Jax right away, but still a guy who, we started becoming closer, and we're really good friends still now. But still a guy who really guided me through that. And then I guess the other two would be Chris Stewart and Kevin Shattenkirk. They were guys who were closer to my age, but had a year or two of NHL experience under their belt, and they got trade the trade deadline when I got called up. So they were kind of new on the team. I was new on the team. We kind of bonded because of that, and we were all the same age. And they had been around. They weren't rookies anymore, so they kind of took me under their wing. We'd go out on the road together. We kind of became running boys. And same kind of thing. They knew how to act, how to get around the league, and I took a lot of their advice. So I would say those are my four.
And isn't that kind of when you're young and you're trying to break in and figuring it out? I think the number one thing that an older guy can do for you is make you feel comfortable, right? Make you feel welcome, make you feel valued in some way, because I think that's all that you're trying to do in that environment is just sort of be a part of it, right? So like having a guy be willing to walk across the room and say, "Hey, let's go for dinner" or something, like that's all it takes sometimes, right?
Oh yeah, it's I never understood. Like, listen, I get the whole I'm the vet, you're the rookie. You get off the bus last. You get on the elevator last. You eat last. Like I understand that stuff, but the berating and the talking down to rookies, and I've experienced that too. And I'm not going to say any names. I don't want to sue anybody, but I've experienced that side of it too. But luckily, I had the Bear Jackmans and the Alex Steens and Stu and Shaddy. I had those guys with me, so it was like, okay, fine. This guy may not like me, or he's the super vet on the team, whatever. But these guys who are really well respected, they're not acting like that, and they're making me feel welcome. They're making me feel like I'm part of the team. So I don't really need to pay attention to that other noise, and it's so important. Like, to me, I've always, as I've become older, it's no secret that's why some of these teams bring me in, is to be kind of that guy. I pride myself on not ever making, especially the young guys, not making them feel uncomfortable. You want, young guys are just as important as these older guys. And, especially in this game now, some of these young guys play much bigger roles than the older guys now, right? And so, to berate them around and make them feel uncomfortable, you're hurting the team. You want those guys to be playing as well as they possibly can, as comfortable as they can, while still respecting the older guys, in the proper way. But you want those guys comfortable, playing right, playing the way you want them to. And the best way to do it is to, make them feel welcome and help them as much as you can.
Right. Is there a value, or what would you put the value of being like a good teammate? Like, where does that live in your ecosystem?
Well, for me, it's top of the list. It's if I was a bad teammate, I don't think I'd really have any contracts. I'll tell you that much. So,
You know what? Let's unpack that a little bit though. Like, what would you define? Like, what is a good teammate to you? What does that mean?
well, in my role, it's sticking up for teammates. It's just doing anything that the team needs, and especially players off the ice. I help. I try and help as much as the young guys. With any of their problem, whatever it is, any problem that they have. I think a lot of guys know that they can come to me. That Keegan Colasar, when I was in Vegas, and I'm only telling the story because he's told the story. He was basically there and soon to take my job, and I knew that. And he played as the 13th forward a couple times. We were some cap trouble. We were scratching a D man. He was playing 13th forward. He's playing like 2 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the games he played 2 minutes. He was dashed two. He had a bunch of turnovers, and he was just so down on himself, and I could see it because but I don't know. You should know that playing 2 minutes in a game is 1,000 times harder than playing 30 minutes in a game, right? You're not in it, and when you do get out there, you you feel like you have to do something. So you're trying hard, you're almost trying too hard, and you're not making the right decisions. And so I just went up to him. I was like, listen, Coley, they know that you're the 13th guy. Everybody sees that you're only playing 2 minutes. Don't let that frustrate you, because you're going to get into that role where you're playing regular minutes. And, then you're going to start playing. Everybody knows how you can play. But right now, it's like it's just a shitty situation. And it's going to be that way for, I don't know how long, but it's going to be like that for a little bit. Just grind through, enjoying the ride, and just grind through it until you get that chance. But when you get that chance, then you got to show them what you can do. And he grinded through a little bit, and then he ended up getting a shot on the third, fourth line for a little, and he played really well. And I remember I got scratched in the playoffs one game for him, and we ended up losing that series. And he came up to me, and whatever, we were a little banged up, but he came up to me. He's like, Revo, anybody else, I would have jumped in that lineup for anybody else, but I didn't want to take your spot. I was like, yeah, you know what, man? I took somebody else's spot when I was younger. I was like, I'm older. You're always looking for the younger guy who costs less and maybe is a little more, has a little more youth, and not as banged up. It is what it is, man. Like
Yeah.
you played well, you deserve the spot. And that next year I was out of Vegas, but still good friends with him, still talk to him every couple of days. So it's part of the business, to look at somebody who is coming to try and take your spot. If you use that as, screw this kid, he's taking my spot, instead of, no, you're not taking my spot, I'm gonna use that as motivation, then but at the same time, we're on the same team, right? So you still want him to do well, but use it as motivation for yourself. That's always been the way I've gone about it.
Yeah, good for you. Because that's hard to manage sometimes, right? Because there's the, I don't know, the human thing of like, I don't want them, like their success means that's probably going to be less success for me. You can have that kind of inherent belief, or you can be like, well, yeah, this is going to be the competitive nature is going to come out in me. And I don't really want him to do well so I can keep my spot. But it's hard to manage that, right? Because sometimes it doesn't work out, well, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't ever want him to do bad. I just wanted me to do a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I wasn't cheering against him,
Yeah.
and I was still helping him along the way. And if he ever needed something, I was still there for him. But I use it as motivation to, play harder, because at the beginning of the year when he came in, I knew like he was at some point he was going to take my spot. It was just a matter of when. When on my contract or whatever it was. Luckily, it didn't happen until the end of the season, but um, it is what it is. And I ended up in New York, went to the conference final, and now I'm in mini. Didn't have a great year this year, or the team didn't have a great year, playoffs anyways, but,
Yeah.
you know, it's just part of the journey.
It is part of the journey. And yeah, like to your point, you mean, and one of those things that an aspect that you embraced has kept you very relevant and wanted, right? Which is an awesome thing. Some of the guys I've had on, Scott Nickel in the past was one that comes to mind right now, that
Scoots, yeah.
essentially his job was to prepare the guy who was going to take his spot. Like he knew that, right? He was a fourth line center, and he would have a young guy who was coming in that he would be nurturing, and then off he would go somewhere else to do the same thing again. So, I mean, there's definitely nothing wrong with that role. It's actually a very needed role. And I think I totally respect the guys that are willing to do it. You mentioned some of the teams you played on. I know we're wrapping up the interview here because you got to get going.
I got another 20 minutes.
Oh, okay,
I got another
cool.
20. Yeah.
Awesome. Played with you played in some really cool spots, right? I mean, Vegas in that inaugural year, like that must have been crazy stories there going to the Stanley Cup final. You played in New York in the Big Apple. You've been around. What first of all, maybe unpack the idea of being traded. Like, how was that the first time? How was it the second time? How do you manage that? Somebody doesn't want you, maybe, or maybe they do, but somebody wants you a little more. I mean, walk through the psychology of that.
So the first time, yeah, the first time I actually found out, my Chris Stewart, he called me. He's like, "Are you getting traded?" And I was like, "No, why?" He's like, "I don't know. Somebody just said you got traded." And I was like, "No, no." And I forgot it was the draft day. And so I'm sitting at home playing ping pong with my brother, and he calls me and he's like, "Yeah, it says you got traded to Pittsburgh." And I just type in my name, and the first thing that popped up said Ryan Reaves for Sidney Crosby. I was like, buddy, are you like, how stupid are you that you're literally listening to all this stuff right now? But then, you start scrolling down. It's like Ryan Reaves been traded. But then there was another Ryan Reaves for Sidney Crosby. It's like, oh, no, it's all smoke. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, Doug Armstrong called me and said, Ryan, we just traded you to Pittsburgh. It was a tough decision, blah, blah, blah. That first day was that first night was okay. It was just kind of unpacking things. And then I remember, and then I still remember the next morning I woke up and I was just laying there and I started thinking about all the really good friends I had in St. Louis, Alex Dean, Rob Bertuzzo, just a good list of guys that I was really comfortable with. And keep in mind, St. Louis was the only thing I ever knew in my career. I played there for 7 years. I'd been in the organization for 10. So that's the only thing I ever knew. And I remember I came downstairs and like almost a baby cry. I looked at my wife and I said, what about the boys? Like, what am I going to do without them? And I was just like, I was broken for that whole day. I was like, man, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to miss these guys so bad. And then it was, I think it was maybe later that night. I was having dinner or just probably having a couple beers. And then I was like, you know what? These guys just won back-to-back cups. I'm going to play with Sidney Crosby and Gino and all these guys, and they want me on their team. It's like, oh, this could be good. Like, this could be fun. What are we talking about here? And once I thought about that, it was a little bit easier. The harder part was I had a wedding. I was going to Alex Dean's wedding a month later in Sweden, and of course, all this St. Louis guys were there. And so that was like my final goodbye, and that was a little tough to say bye to him because like that's all I ever knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that the first one was really hard, like emotionally for me, I think. Lasted, probably about a month. And then, then I got to Pittsburgh and I was excited about that. And then didn't really play a lot in Pittsburgh. I think their whole plan was to just have me play, that 4 minutes and just kind of be a deterrent for, you touch Crosby or one of our top guys and, then okay, and then Revo's going to touch the ice. And I wasn't having fun. I was, playing 4 minutes a night and basically going home and drinking beer all day. Like I was miserable there. And then I got traded from there to Vegas, found out on the phone again first. Somebody texted me, say, you getting traded? And it was going through Twitter, and sure enough. And Kelly McCrimmon, who was my coach in Brandon, coach, GM, owner, he called me and he's like, you're excited to come here? And I was like, Krim, I'm excited to go anywhere I'm wanted. And I really liked Krim. He was, sorry, I guess I'll rewind. Kelly McCrimmon would be another guy who's been a mentor my whole career. For sure, he gave me a lot of chances in junior, just a young, stupid kid, probably made a couple of mistakes, and he really stuck with me a lot. And he was a guy that throughout my career, if something was going wrong, even though I wasn't playing for him anymore, he's a guy that I would call him. So just a little shout out to Grim.
Right. No, that's great.
So I got to Vegas, and that that rest of the year was unbelievable. That was the first year I've never seen a city jump on the back of a team so quickly. It was like driving down the Strip, driving down in Summerlin, which is like where we all lived. Everything was plastered in Golden Knight stuff, and I was like, this team has been here for a couple months. I was like, how is the city so in love with them already? And it was so fun to see. The playoff run we went down. Just the atmosphere in that arena. It's just a big party outside. Like you're on the Strip. I remember where we play soccer. There's a gate that when it gets warm, they'll open it up, and so you're playing soccer, but the gate opens to the Strip. And I just remember one time they opened, I looked, I was like, I can't believe I'm playing hockey here. Like, this is crazy.
Right.
And it was just so fun. That was a lot of fun. And then when I got traded from Vegas, that one hurt a little bit just because I think I thought I wanted to retire there. And I think I thought I was gonna.
Excuse me.
But Kolesar came in and took my spot. And so they gave me the option. They said, you can either stay here and not play a ton, or you can go to New York and, they'll give you an extension. You can play there. And I sat on it for a day. And at first I was like, no, I don't want to go. And then I was having a couple beers and I just looked at my wife and I said, no, we're going to New York. And she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean? I was like, I'm not wanted here anymore. I'm wanted in New York. I'm wanted in New York. They want to offer me an extension right now. and they want me there. They actually tried signing me out of free agency after the first year in Vegas. And I looked at her, I was like, we're going. And she's like, whoa, let's talk. I was like, no, we're going. I called Krim and I was like, Krim, I'm going, trade me. And that was that. We went to New York and then played 1 year there, went to the conference final, and then had a slower start to that season. And then I found out I was on the trading block, found that out on Twitter again. And I didn't really want to leave because I made some pretty good friends in New York. But
What was
at
it
the
like
same
playing there?
time,
Like, what was the city like being a Ranger?
yeah, so being a Ranger was really cool. I loved Madison Square Garden and just the hype of the city and just being an original six team. That was so cool to me. Putting on that sweater was, a moment I'll never forget. I lived out in Greenwich, Connecticut, because of the school district there, a really good school system.
Yeah.
So me and that Barkley Goodrow, we would hop on a train the first year. We'd hop on a train and train 55 minutes to games, get a day room, sleep there, and then drive, depending on traffic, anywhere from 55 to an hour and a half home. And that really wore me out. I absolutely hated that. I didn't like going. I didn't like having to go on a train. I didn't like having to sleep downtown New York in a hotel room where all you can hear is sirens and horns. And so it never really had a good nap there. And then driving home, I don't sleep well after a game. Like after a game, 4 o'clock is a good night for me. But to have to drive home an hour and a half and not get home until 11:30 and then eat and then try and wind down, it was just I didn't enjoy that aspect. I think if I was single, it would have been easier. I would have lived downtown.
Yeah.
Would have been easier, but I had a family and I wasn't bringing them downtown New York. So,
Right.
yeah, it was a cool experience. I think my location kind of ruined it a little bit for me.
Right. What was as far as the road? Well, I mean, I'm thinking because I play against the Las Vegas. I was in the IHL for like a hot minute and played with Long Beach back in the day, and so they had the Las Vegas Thunder there. So we went to Las Vegas for a road trip, and I just remember like my experience being on the road in Vegas, right? Like going there, playing pro hockey, and didn't go to bed at the let's say the optimal time that I probably should have before a game. And then you playing with New York, like with the road trips now, I've talked to a few guys. It seems like it's kind of changed. Have you seen that for in your era? Like what's going on?
Yeah, I think we used to run a lot harder when I was younger in the league than I think most teams do now.
Yeah,
Most guys do. Um, maybe part of that is social media. I
right,
think maybe when you were younger, yeah, there was some games where the night before a game you're out till 2 in the morning, and you know, Instagram and Twitter weren't as big, so you weren't plastered all over the internet.
right,
But I think more like the culture's just changed a little bit. I think these younger guys would rather go to bed at 9 o'clock and drink their carrot juice than go out and have a couple of beers until
right,
12 or 11 o'clock. So things have changed a little bit. I got kids now. I can't do that as much anymore, if any, to be honest with you. So,
right.
but yeah, I think it's definitely changed a little bit.
Is the PlayStation or the Xbox, is that a thing, a real thing? Like guys bring that and they do room service. Guys don't go out to eat anymore. Really, is that kind of dead?
Yeah. Well, I bring my laptop. I play Call of Duty. I do, and I bring it on the road. But I bring it on the road for after games because, like I told you, I don't fall asleep till 4 o'clock in the morning. So I usually just play video games for a bit. Um, I would say the only time I take the laptop out and play video games and don't go out for dinner would be like when you're in New Jersey or like a city where you just don't want to leave the hotel. Like,
Right,
not a city that has a lot of nice restaurants, you know what I mean? So, yeah, but I try not to jump in that trap, but I do know there are guys that do that. I've played with some, and I've heard the stories around the league. I think it was Vancouver a couple of years ago. They had a big, was it Vancouver or Winnipeg? Had a big problem with that, where guys were just getting in the room and playing Xbox till 2 in the morning, and it was just a disaster.
right. Yeah, I mean, 'cause the thing that breaks my heart about that is one, I mean, that was where I kind of had like that was just what part of the experience, like being a pro, and then the part about the whole culture of the team. Like when you would go out, like, where are we going for tonight, boys? Right? Like where are we
Yeah.
headed? Right? Like that was such a fun way to bond and to be together, and also to see the city and stuff. So when I heard that guys are ordering room service, and I mean, kind of, I guess with the bubble, everyone had to sort of do that. That was kind of a crazy time for you guys, but I just love that aspect of it. I'm like, oh my God, if they're not going out for dinner anymore, like, geez, that takes half the fun out of pro hockey.
I mean, that's going to be what I miss probably the most about playing in the NHL is just going out on the road. Oh, excuse me, going on the road with the boys and having dinner, having a couple beers, and
Yeah.
shooting the shit. So yeah, I try not to fall into that trap.
Right. Well, and then I guess you being the role that you're in now, you're probably one of the guys that's saying, "Hey, this is where we're going," right? Like, let's rock
Normally,
and
yeah,
roll.
normally, yeah.
Yeah, good for you. Um, Maybe that's a good way to wrap. I mean, we're tight for time. How old are you now, Revo?
36.
36. So, as far as you and the timeline, do you want to play as long as you can till no one's going to give you a contract, or like what do you have for your horizon?
Oh man, I still really want to chase a cup. It's been very elusive to me.
Yeah,
And I know a lot of players, the majority of players don't get to experience that, but it's something I really want, obviously. Um, but I'm also at 800 and I think 20 or 30 games. Like I would love to get to 1,000. I think, for me personally, growing up and having so many people tell me I wasn't going to play in the NHL, and I wasn't good enough to play in the NHL. Well, okay, now you're not good enough to stay, and now I'm here. I think that would just be the nice cherry on top. I think to me that would be the ultimate accomplishment, besides winning the Stanley Cup. I think I did the math. I need 2 full seasons and then like 6 games after that. So I do need three. I do need 3 more seasons. So
right.
um, we'll see. Like playing to 39, the body is definitely starting to slow down. Like I can really feel it the last couple of years. But knock on wood, I haven't had too many major injuries in my career that have made me miss some significant time. So yeah, that would I think that would be the goal as of right
Yeah.
now, is to
Uh,
try and play at least 3 more seasons. And if I think it'd be cool to say I'm playing in the NHL in 40 at 42. So
yeah.
maybe we can do that.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, and I mean, it is really an exclusive club, that 1,000 game club for sure.
Yeah.
Not many people in it. I can't remember what I think there's. What do you know? How many people are in it? Like, there's like 500 or something, or like there's not many.
My wife told me the other day, I want to say she said 400 and something, but I could be wrong.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's a pretty special club to be a part of, and yeah, I mean, successful nonetheless, though, man. Like, congratulations on a fantastic career so far, and
appreciate
thanks
it.
for spending the time with us today. And you mean that Minnesota team, man? I think you guys like it's a really fun team. I mean, you got maybe. I don't know. Like I like the way your makeup. I like the brand of hockey you play. I think that you're probably enjoying that aspect too. It's a pretty old school style, and you got some skill and some talent. So who knows? I mean, that's could be one season away from that cup that you're looking for.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm excited about excited about it. Hopefully, I can work out a contract here, but yeah, it's a fun place to play.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. Ryan Reaves, Minnesota Wild currently. We'll find out where he lands next year. But what is it now? Look here, 800 and do you know how many games? 800 and
820
lots.
something maybe.
820 something. So
Yeah,
yeah, definitely has stuck around, playing still into his late 30s. And thanks again for being here, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sticking here till the end. Ryan, if you're still listening or ever listening, thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate the conversation. It was super easy to have. Ryan is somebody that we've never met before, never had a conversation. I'm sure he probably has never even heard of my name. We're from different generations, but he was gracious enough to come on, made the conversation super easy, and it was always fun to talk hockey, especially with somebody who's current, somebody who's relevant, somebody who is in the game right now, playing in the NHL. I know most of my guests are former NHL players, so it's always nice to get guys on that are doing it as we speak. Lots of topics that we didn't touch on. Like, again, it's amazing how quick an hour goes. I know Ryan has lots of involvement with the NHL Diversity Committee. I know that he's been a voice and a representative of that and diversity in the game. And he spoke out on racism in the past. We didn't talk about color at all in this interview. We didn't talk about parenting at all in this interview. He is the father of a son and daughter, and the boy is getting the 7-year-old is getting into hockey and what that looks like as a hockey dad. So there's a lot that we could have still talked about, and we did mention that maybe there will be a part 2. So we'll let Ryan find where he's going to lay his head next year as far as what team he's going to be on, and potentially we'll speak with him here in the coming months. But again, a great conversation, lots of laughs, lots of smiles from me personally. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for being here for this one. Until next time, play hard and keep your head up.